Jimmy K here, Metal Voice. Look at this. The Metal Voice shirts are now on sale. Just go to the video description to find out on how you can purchase one. Metal! Welcome to the Metal Voice. Today on the show, we're talking to early guitarist Terry Wapram. Am I pronouncing your last name correct?
Yeah, that's right, yes.
Yes. Who was with the band, I'm assuming for about, was it a year's time? Is that correct?
Looking at it, because obviously it's a long time ago, I think I went in June, July in 77 and came out like late February 78. It's about 8 months, I think, somewhere around that, yeah.
Well, you know what fascinates me? I spoke to Thunderstick, I've spoken to Doug Sampson. I like to capture that early sort of Maiden before that first album, that iconic first album was made, and I thought it'd be great to talk to you. And the big news with you is the Ides of March, fronted by Paul Di'Anno. You guys will be performing at Beermageddon, Paul's final performance on August 30th. And the band is completed by, of course, yourself on guitars, Terry Rance on guitars, another early Maiden guitarist, Doug Sampson on drums, and Steve or Speed Harris on bass.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how this performance came about.
Well, we were approached by Steve, who's put this whole, obviously Steve Golby, not
Steve, not Steve Harris, Steve Golby. I got it.
No, yeah, Steve Golby. He approached us to do something to commemorate the 45th anniversary, and he wanted to get as close to he could as one of the very early lineups, because we were all in at slightly different times. I mean, I think in the scheme of things, I was about guitarist number 5. Yeah. It was the first time they'd gone with like one guitarist, and then Tony Moore came in and duplicated some of the harmony parts on keyboards and that. But obviously they realised in the long run you actually needed 2 guitars. But no, we were all in at slightly different periods. Terry Rance was in earlier. He was in right from the very earliest point, him and his other partner in crime. And then there was a couple of other people. And then obviously Paul Di'Anno, who was on the first iconic 2 albums and did such an amazing job. He was afterwards. Doug, I knew at the time, but I think we might have played a little bit around the time, but he was also after me. I mean, as I think you realise, that the lineup I was in had Thunderstick in, and also Ron Rebel Matthews was playing drums in the very early part of it.
Yeah. So what is the set list going to be consisting of? The first album only, or are you going to play some? Because the killer stuff is all actually. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't want to kind of name it exactly. It could change. Plus, it might take a little of the fun out of it. But yeah, it's very much in keeping with different members' times. I mean, it'll feature a really good chunk of the first album, some of the second album, plus some of the more obscure sort of releases as well from around that time. So, I mean, it stands to be really interesting, and we're looking at it in a way where, although we'll be faithful to the recorded versions, we may just tweak things a little to how it would have been in our own time. I mean, for instance, some of the stuff was played slower initially before it was recorded, which actually didn't take away from it. It kind of made it very powerful, a more sort of steady pace. But I'm not saying we're going to play everything slow, but there will be some touches to do with how the individual people played the songs at the time. I mean, myself, I played all of the first album, obviously in rehearsals and sometimes live, a good chunk of the second album and stuff like that. And then some of the things like Killers and that definitely came after me, even Running Free, stuff like that. But a hell of a lot of stuff is in the time frame that we all had. But some of the stuff for, say, Terry Rance is a little after him. Doug played on a lot of it. I mean, once it went on to oh God, Clive Burr, then it was a whole different period, you know, a different style of drumming and everything. But I think this is really good. I mean, it's kind of like if you could get a time machine, this is the closest you could get to it, really.
A lot of people don't realize, but the second album, the majority of the material was actually written, you know, at the same time as the first album. This was just
basically... No, that's correct.
Right. So these were the songs you guys were jamming already.
Yeah. Rothschild and stuff like that was being played for a long period of time on it all, you know, and like stuff like that. But yeah, it kind of didn't go in chronological order, really. I think they picked what their favourites were for the first album, then some of the stuff filtered. But the whole kind of two albums, as I say, there's songs on there that definitely were outside of my time period, but a really big chunk of both of those was kind of, you know, I would have played or certainly rehearsed anyway, you know. So it's interesting, but going back to them, you know, it's God, what is it? Maybe 44 years more, even maybe. I've had to kind of relearn them and look at them again. You know, I mean, I'm starting to remember them as I'm playing them, but that's a hell of a long time. You know, you don't keep that in mind, apart from a few guest appearances where I've played with Maiden tribute bands, and now I've rarely played the songs. I mean, when we did the Paul Mario Day at the Cart and Horses, we had 2 or 3 songs there that we were doing from that period, and 2 with Paul, and 1 that we were doing ourselves with a friend from Norway, Marius. But yeah, I mean, I'm finding it really interesting. It's the most disciplined I've been for a long time. I mean, I now in a couple of other things. Obviously, I've had Buffalo Fish going for about 5 years, which is my main band. And it's an all-original band. We occasionally play things like Voodoo Child or occasionally Rothschild or something like that. But in general, it's all original. So for me, it's a different, whole different deal, sitting down learning again, you know, and it really is learning because it's been so long. I actually sort of sit and look at them and listen to the tracks and look at people playing them and that and pick it all out again, you know. But it's actually... It's good. It's going well. I mean, I've sat down with Terry Rance the other day and we've started picking who's doing what, the low harmony, the high harmony, or who's got the rhythm over here or this or that. And I mean, it feels quite positive. I do believe, you know, when we really get the rehearsals rolling, I think we can give a really solid platform for Paul to feel comfortable and do his absolute best, as I know he will. You know, he's a top professional, and you know, as I say, his contribution to early Maiden is very, very strong, you know.
Obscure tracks, you know, were you around when Invasion was recorded, or at least put together, and Burning Ambition?
Burning Ambition, I'm not so sure. Definitely not Invasion. I mean, as I say, it really is quite a long time, so it's very difficult to accurately pull it all back in. But I definitely not Invasion, and Burning Ambition possibly. But I mean, I've literally just relearned that again. I mean, that's
I know that's gonna be one of the obscure ones to be played. I'm just taking a guess here because those are the obscure tracks, right?
Yeah, I mean, these have been bandied around, but as I say, I you know, I really wouldn't like to say too much in case it kind of spoils the night for people. But no, it's a very positive feeling, and I mean, the one guy that's not ex-Maiden, Speed Harris, I mean, he's played in one of the premier tribute Maiden bands over here, High on Maiden. And so, I mean, he's very well versed in all the tracks, probably more so than the rest of us, to be honest with you.
He does it all the time, right? Yeah.
You know, yeah, I mean, that's what you need. You know, I mean, he's very comfortable with it. I really have great hopes for this. I mean, it could have sold out even more than it did. You know, the venue sold out almost straight away, and
5 days.
You know, it's going to be, you know,
sold out in 5 days. That's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the centerpiece of a film on Paul's life.
That's another point we should bring
great.
up.
The same man that done the Lemmy Lemmy film. So I mean, that'll be great. It'll be properly recorded and filmed and everything, and there's all sorts of ideas to give people chances to see it.
Sorry to cut you off. Directed by Wes or Shoki, the man responsible for Lemmy. Just wanted to throw out his name there. And I have limited information on all of this. I mean, I can only sort of speak about my own involvement. But... Of course. Does Steve Harris know about this? Is he on board with this, or does he have to be on board with this? I don't know.
Well, I don't, in general, speak to him. I haven't seen him for some number of years. I last saw him at Ronnie Rebel's wife's 50th and his son's 21st, and Steve came down to that. Mm-hmm. And since then, I've not seen him. So that was some time ago. But I believe Steve and Doug and everyone are still very, very friendly with Steve. I don't think he would have a problem with this. I mean, it's kind of just, I don't know, it's in keeping with it. It's something that I've never done before. I mean, there's always been the possibility for any of us from the early days to have gone out and played a load of Maiden stuff. You know, some people have, but most of us haven't. And I've avoided it kind of up to now, and this seemed like the right opportunity. I mean, in general, people are behind it. I think some people are a little wary and think, you know, everyone's trying to cash in on it, but I mean, it's really not like that. You're not going to do a venue that size and make an absolute fortune and you know, do anything silly. I mean, this is a genuine homage to one of the biggest bands in the world, you know.
Tell me about how you, and I guess the story's been told many times, how you joined the band, but I guess for everybody out there who's not familiar with you, tell me how you first got into Iron Maiden and the year. I guess you told me the year, but I guess 1977, but how your involvement with Iron Maiden.
Yeah. Well, what first happened, Dennis Wilcock came to the marquee because he did the photography for a band called Bearded Lady, who were great friends of ours. And I was down there with a band, I believe the band at the time would have been called Hooker. And we were opening up for them, and then I guested with them as well. And I was seen there, and at that point, I don't really know the full story, but there'd been some problem with Dave and oh God, I should have written all this down so I could get all the names. So Bob Sawyer, who I mean, I know Bob well as well. Well, there was some problem, and they were going out of the band going out of the band at the time. I mean, obviously Dave came back, but so he approached me when I think things were a little shaky, but I was kind of busy at the time, so I didn't do anything about it straight away. And then I think the band I was working with kind of slowed up a bit. So then I approached them, and I basically just went down and played with them and got given the job. I mean, they didn't put me under any real pressure or anything, and basically just started rehearsing with them. I mean, it was quite a turbulent time, really. Then I feel it was a time when they were sort of finding their feet, you know, and working out what they really needed. Obviously, moving away from the two guitar thing was not necessarily the right choice, but they wanted to try keyboards, and we all know later on that they've got keyboards in the lineup, you know, someone off to the side and that. But I think once you took the other guitar out the way, it made it quite challenging. And obviously, you know, I was a very capable guitarist at the time, because I'd been playing in three pieces a lot of the time, where you really had to stay busy and fill all the holes in. So that wasn't the problem. The problem was not being able to play the harmonies properly. I remember in the beginning, Steve Harris developed a kind of style where he was playing the bass, and then he'd play some of the harmony with me and kind of jump back down on the bass end of the neck as well. But I mean, that obviously took some of the power out of it. So I mean, basically, they went back to two guitar lineup later on. But yeah, that's how I got in. I mean, they really didn't make it hard at all. I kind of showed interest after I'd been approached, went down, and they gave me the job, you know. And at that point, Ronnie Rebel was playing drums, and we played a number of gigs just with like four of us. And then something went wrong with Ron. They appeared unhappy with Ron, and they put out the ad for a drummer and a keyboard player, and Thundersticks came in and got the gig. I mean, at that point, he was working under his own name. That's before he'd became Thundersticks. He was obviously Barry Graham Purkis, and Tony Moore came in. And it was funny because I was talking to Tony on a radio show, his radio show, and he asked me a really funny question. It was quite sort of embarrassing, really. He said, you know, when I came down and I got the job straight away, he said, how many other people showed up to the audition? And I had to start laughing. I mean, we were live on radio. I said, actually, you were the only one. I said, but we did really genuinely like you. I mean, but he's another close friend as well. I mean, Tony's had a very interesting career, same as Barry, you know, with Thundersticks and Samson and that.
Yeah, when you look at the first two albums, you know, do you see any sort of little small guitar inflections that are there that you said, you know what, that was kind of like my little thing I put? Or was there any little twists or any little contributions riff-wise that you have on the first two albums?
Well, obviously, I'd like to say categorically before I make any comment like that, I've in my opinion, when you help with a song, you're not writing it, because obviously, you know, all this kerfuffle going on at the moment.
Yes.
So, yes, certain bits of the songs, I mean, Phantom springs to mind. I mean, you know, I was very impressed when I was first shown that riff. I really thought it crossed the barrier into a whole, you know, another thing. I mean, it was like their version of Bohemian Rhapsody almost, where there were so many pieces. So, you know, I'd be sitting down with Steve looking at that, and Tony Moore, and we'd be looking at pieces, and you know, everyone would go, what about a bit of this or a bit of that? And then he'd say, yeah, yes or no, and we could do this, we could do that. So there was a good involvement in that and a few other bits and pieces. But I mean, that one in particular, it's funny playing it now, because that's the one I felt would be the most work to relearn, because I've refused to guest playing that, because it's an awful lot of work if you're going to just do it like, you know, on a guest thing. Now we're actually going to do it as a real gig. I've sat down and re-examined it, and I mean, I do kind of remember the pieces, and it's really strange because when I first started to replay it, I kind of played it more lumpy, kind of, I think, how it might have gone at the time. And then when I tried to play what I considered was my version against the actual track, just to make sure everything was in line, I quickly fell out of time with the track, and I realized that the version that kind of ended up probably was slightly, just the main riff, you know, the actual opening riff, was slightly tweaked, possibly to what we were doing. But I mean, once I sat and looked at it for a bit, it was no different in difficulty to play. It was just, you know, flipping a note through quicker and maybe missing one. I mean, their stuff can be quite quick. So, you know, if you miss a note, or you can play a note, and it can almost sound like it if it's not even right. You know, what we're actually attempting to do, without being a tribute band, is get as close as we can to the recorded versions, but with our own feel and little pieces in there. You know, we're not going to go out like a tribute band, definitely not, you know.
What songs were created during your time? Like, I know that there was already songs already in the bank, right, by the time you joined. But what songs do you remember? Hey, you know what? This song was a brand new song from Iron Maiden when you first joined.
Well, it was like some of the second album, and as I say, you know, Phantom came up in that exact time. I mean, like I say, a lot of the stuff they'd been doing and different things had gone on. I mean, that's very difficult to say now. As I say, that would be the only one I think I would have any real comment on. But I spent a lot of time rehearsing with them more than actually playing live, because what was happening, where it was sort of a flux of change. You know, we'd done some gigs with Ronnie, and then Ronnie went out, and then Tony Moore and Thunderstick came in. I think Tony done the one gig with them, as far as I can remember, and he lived in the same road as me at the time. And I remember him coming round to me saying, I'm not feeling quite right about this. I'm going to pull out. And he actually used my payphone in Rentham Avenue, which is near Willesden, and rung them up and came out. So then at that point, it all kind of went a bit strange, and there was, discussions what would go on. And when I didn't really show any interest in being in a 2-guitar lineup, because as I say, at that point, I'd never really done it. I mean, I've done it extensively now. I'm my regular band, Buffalo Fish, there's 3 of us in it. The singer plays guitar, and I have another young guitarist with me, a real kind of young guitar wizard, Jamie Carter. But so that's the reason I kind of came out, really. I briefly came out to work with a bloke called Johnny Warman when things were a bit slow, and then I went back, and then when I showed no real interest in being a 2-guitar lineup was when they decided to kind of move on without me. But I think it was a very, I suppose really it was a lot of rehearsing and not that many gigs, but it was a very interesting period, and I spent massive amount of time sitting around at Steve's Nan's, tinkering around with things with him. It was a very interesting time, really.
Played 1 gig with the band, but it sounds like you played a few more than that.
Right?
No.
The people say all sorts of silly things. I think I played about 5, maybe 6 gigs with them. I mean, the funniest one I remember playing with them, we were on a fairground. I mean, I've told this story in the early days video. I think the actual silly part of it came out as an Easter egg because it was kind of Spinal Tap. But Dave Lights was doing the lights, as I'm sure you know, at the time, and there was no real budget. They used to have like a proper smoke machine. They used to use half house bricks and take all the gunpowder out of fireworks and put 2 live wires from the mains in, and then plug the plug in and flick a switch, and obviously it ignited when the current went through the gunpowder. And we were at this fairground, and I had a big pedal board at the time, and I hadn't really paid attention to when the flashes were going to go off, and we're playing away, and in the distance you can see the Ferris wheel going round.
Yeah, wow.
A crowd of people looking at us. I stepped forward to stand on something just exactly as Dave Lights set off one of these thunder flashes. It nearly took my eyebrows off. I mean, It completely shocked me. I stood back, and the weirdest thing is all this molten gunpowder leaked out the brick onto the stage, set fire to the corner of my pedal board, and also started to burn the PA cables. I mean, loads of people were running around, got it under control, but I mean, that just cracked me up. You had to stay like as if it was part of the show or something. You couldn't crack up and fall about like, but it was mental. I mean, it was really funny. But they were always famous for their show at the time. Even as a sort of pub band, they put on the best show around.
And we should also mention that Dave Beasley Lights it will also take part in this Ides of March performance. I guess he's doing the lights, correct?
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting things going on. They're working up a good stage show. They've got their own Eddie, which obviously won't be a 30-foot Eddie. It's someone who does a lot of Eddie stuff with Iron Maiden. He's a really good guy as well, and another Maiden expert. Yeah, Dave will be lighting it, and he's making plans for an interesting set and little ways to keep it interesting and light it up. I mean, it's brilliant. I've stayed friends with Dave as well, because obviously Dave went on to really work with them. I came out, I don't know what it was exactly, maybe a year before they got signed, because they went through a few more guitarists before they settled on the lineup on the first album. And so Dave did, I'm not sure, he would know better when you talk to him, but I think he did about 8 years touring with them or something. And I mean, Dave yet again had another great career. He done UFO, all sorts of people. He even lit the Queen's Jubilee or something over here. I mean, he would be able to tell you probably. There was some or the Princess Di thing. I'm probably telling you wrong. I mean, check that one out. But he's done a lot of things. It's brilliant to have him with us. I mean, he's a great friend. Paul will be pleased with that,
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you, so this lineup, this Ides of March, which will be performing August 30th, okay, Paul said it's the end for him, but is there any chance of the rest of the band continuing with or recording perhaps?
I don't know. Everyone's very positive. I mean, I got a very good feeling from the first meeting we had, the production meeting, when the initial photos were done, and sitting with Terry. As I say, I'm in a. I just want to get something in a second, and then I'll answer that question. Obviously, I'm with Buffalo Fishing. I'm also doing a project with a Norwegian friend, Marius Danielson. I mean, he's Valley of Doom. He does all sorts of things, and
Sure.
oh god, he's like prolific. So there's things I'm doing, but yeah, we're looking at this, and no, I'm not honestly sure. I mean, I get a really good feeling because I think Terry and I are going to work well together. I mean, he's a great performer. A brilliant kind of rhythm player. I mean, I'll be carrying most of the solo work. We'll be playing harmonies in that, but I think there could be a possibility. I just don't know. I mean, I think Paul really is viewing this as his last outing, which is why it's so important to get it really right, you know, for many, many reasons, and for ourselves. I mean, no one wants to look silly, but I think the rest of us would consider doing things, because obviously now it's come on top what's going on. There are more offers coming in, you know, all over the place. But I would give Steve his due on this. You know, the first man that picked up this gig, the man from Beermageddon, you know, he stayed loyal to him, you know. And it's a smaller festival than this probably could have sold out, you know, but I think that's an honourable thing. I know in business that's not normally the way, but yeah, I think you have to give it to him for that, and good on the guy for, you know, giving this thing the opportunity, really.
I think, you know, if there's anything you see today or that was told in the history of Iron Maiden that, you know, maybe that wasn't quite right, that you might want to correct.
Well, it's just the thing about the amount of time and stuff. I mean, obviously, one of the people that got all us sort of ex-guys back on the map was a Dutchman, Erwin, and he wrote a book with various links to what all of us were doing, so people could actually see what we'd done. Because a lot of people assumed you're in Iron Maiden and then you just go away, and you know, some people actually did and had long gaps. Myself, I've played all the time in all sorts of lineups. But yeah, I think the two things to correct was, yeah, obviously I've played more than one gig. I was in it about 8 months, and Thundersticks came in after me, because I was already there playing with Ronnie and we'd already done gigs, and I left in February, and I think he might have gone on to March or something, but they this isn't any disagreement, because Thundersticks is a really close friend anyway, but when they say, you know, he was in it like 2 months longer or something, that's not actually correct. But I mean, it's not a big thing. It's just the dates of it. Some people, you know, are saying things like, oh, there's, you know, there have been guitarists that have been in it for an afternoon or a week. You know, it's a very big thing. I think they've had some ridiculous amount of guitarists. I'm not even going to take a stab at it. Well past 10, you know, like going into the 15 or something. Jeez, yeah. So it's funny, but no, I had a really good long run with them, and I felt it was a very good developing period. And what I took away from them, I put into the band V1. I formed V1 straight after Maiden, and I took some of their approaches and done it in a weirder way. But you know, they deserve to be where they are. They're a really hard-working, very talented band. You know.
Yeah. How many times did you practice with Iron Maiden when you were in the band? You were in there for 8 months. Was it like 3 times a week, 4 times a week?
I don't really know. I mean, I spent quite a bit of time sitting with Steve, you know, tinkering about. And then I think we were at Scar Studios quite a lot. And then we were at one of these other studios where there was a program over there called Metal Mickey. And this particular studio owned a little robot thing. And when you went in the foyer, they were in there, but the robot was in there. But yeah, we rehearsed quite a lot. As I say, it was a handful of gigs, but the reason for that was the lineup was changing all the time. You'd get one thing right, and then you'd have to start rehearsing with someone else. And then, Tony went out, and that was a bit of a thing to think, well, what are we going to do now? It was a kind of time of upheaval. But what I liked about it was when they came back, Steve never lost his vision on what he was trying to do. And I think they came back stronger when they tried all these other things. They realised the 2-guitar lineup was correct for them, or at least the harmony lineup. Obviously, I appreciate there's 3 of them now. And I think it shook out a lot of things, but just feels nice to have been part of something that...
Sure, absolutely. History.
Something that big. And obviously, it's kept interesting me up over the years. I think really what held me back a little bit was I wouldn't do social media. I only started doing social media maybe 3 years ago, and because I didn't particularly want to tell someone at the time what strings I used or how something happened. But
so what strings did you use?
No,
just kidding.
Yeah. Well, you get all of that. I mean, it's funny. But like now, I realise that if you're trying to play music, you've kind of got to be accessible to some level. And you have to have some interplay with people and give them a chance. Most people are very gracious. The 9.5 out of 10 people are brilliant, no problem. Whenever we're anywhere like Burfest or any of the events, and as I say, there's been many events at the Cart and Horses, where I've worked a lot. That's the first place I met Paul. I'd never met Paul back in the day. I met Paul at a day when he came in to do like a talk, like a meet and greet, everyone could ask him questions and that was brilliant. I mean, he was very gracious and gave everyone a lot of time and was very polite with people. It was good. Really interesting.
Here's the last question. And I guess it's kind of the last question is this. Did you ever think Iron Maiden would be this big? But I guess not, right? Because you would have stuck around if you never thought it was this big.
No. I mean, that's the funniest one of the lot. That's the sort of $1 million question everyone asks. At the time when I went into them, they were the biggest thing, like on the pub circuit, and you could tell they were rising. But I couldn't tell at that point how far they could go. And then when I came out, and Dennis came out slightly after me to form V1 with me, that really knocked Steve back for a while, and he was kind of considering at the time his options if he could pull it all back together, because he was just left with Dave Murray really and a drummer at that point. But no, you could have never told at that point. I mean, they've grown enormously, and I know some people kind of don't like them to move on and they just want more of the same. But I mean, the amount of albums they've done, the amount of years they've been top of their game, they've had to move from where they originally stood. I mean, the first 2 albums are utterly iconic, but they've done some great albums later on as well, and they're still producing great music and amazing live shows,
Cool. That's it. That's pretty much it. So everybody out there, Ides of March, fronted by Paul Diano, Terry Wapram on guitars and Terry Rance on guitars, Doug Sampson on drums, and Speed Harris on bass. Pick up the merch. I know there's cool T-shirts, Ides of March T-shirts you can pick up. And your band, once again, you want to get a plug for your band?
Yeah, Buffalo Fish is the band I'm working with now, and I've also got an internet project called Steel Axe with all X names, Thundersticks in it. There's all sorts of stuff. You can find that out through Marius. As I say, Darkest Sins, I think, is his other band. I mean, I should have had all this laying around me to give accurate things. But yeah, Buffalo Fish, I will be doing the second album with Buffalo Fish this year. There's 1 album out, plus we have a song and a film. We have in a really awarded independent film. We've got a song in it called Mr. K, and the film's called Untitled, a film, and it's on Prime, Amazon Prime. You can see it. It's kind of half ZZ Top, half dance music. It's crazy, and because it was such a meaty song, normally at the end of a film, they cut into different music. They use the entire track, about a 5 or 6 minute track is the entire play out of this film. It's brilliant. went to the premiere, I was thrilled.
Wow, that's amazing, Terry. Thank you so much for taking your time out today to speak to me. Say farewell to the future.